Today, we're going to be tackling the world of semiconductors.
Ooh, exciting.
I know, right? These tiny little pieces of tech that, well, they power practically everything these days.
Absolutely. They're everywhere.
And specifically, we're going to be looking at Intel. You know, the American giant.
Yeah.
They've been trying to get back on top.
Right. Regain that top spot.
Against some pretty tough competition, like Taiwan's TSMC.
Oh, yeah. TSMC is a major player.
So this all came about because one of you awesome listeners sent in a question.
Always love hearing from the listeners.
Right. They were wondering if new tariffs on those imported chips, from places like TSMC,
Okay, yeah.
could give Intel a chance to jump ahead, maybe even leapfrog the competition.
That's a great question. It's a fascinating scenario for sure. I mean, the idea that Intel could actually use this as a springboard.
Right. Not just like, survive, but actually dominate.
Exactly. It's not just about staying in the game, it's about winning it.
I love it. So we took your question and we did a little digging. And let me tell you, this stuff is juicy.
I'm ready. Lay it on me.
All right. So first things first, paint the picture for me. How would these tariffs actually shake things up? Like, what would that look like in the real world?
Okay, well, for starters, think about it like this. Tariffs on those chips from companies like TSMC and Samsung,
Okay.
that makes them instantly more expensive, right, for companies here in the U.S.
Right. Makes sense.
So suddenly, Intel's chips, even if they're not, the absolute most advanced, they start to look a lot more appealing because they're cheaper.
So it's like a price war, but with like the government kind of nudging things along.
You got it. And it goes beyond just individual companies buying chips, too. You got to think about the big stuff. Government contracts, those massive deals, like for defense systems or infrastructure projects. If Intel's chips are suddenly the more cost-effective option, they could be winning a lot of those bids.
Oh, that's a huge advantage.
Right. It gives them a real edge. And there's even some chatter out there that some companies who are currently working with TSMC,
Okay.
they might start to shift some of their production over to Intel.
Really?
Just to try and, dodge those tariffs, avoid those extra costs.
Wow, that could be a massive change.
It could completely reshape the landscape.
But I'm guessing TSMC is not just going to sit back and watch all this happen, right?
No, absolutely not.
They're the leaders for a reason.
Oh, TSMC is not going down without a fight. They're already way ahead when it comes to making those super advanced chips.
Right.
It all comes down to these things called process nodes, which basically, they determine just how small and powerful they can make those transistors on a chip.
I've heard of those, but I don't really know exactly what they are.
Right. So imagine this. Billions of transistors.
Yeah.
These tiny little switches that make computing possible. You got to squeeze all those onto a chip the size of your fingernail.
Wow.
That's how small we're talking. And TSMC, they're mass-producing chips with their 5-nanometer node right now. They call it N5.
That's incredible. And I think I read somewhere that they're already working on even smaller nodes.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Their 3-nanometer node, or N3, it's already in the works. They're ramping up production.
So smaller nodes, that means more transistors packed in, right?
You got it. And that translates to faster processing speeds, lower power consumption, all that good stuff.
Okay, so it sounds like Intel has a lot of catching up to do.
Yeah, they've got their work cut out for them.
If they want to even get close to TSMC, let alone overtake them.
Definitely a challenge.
So are they just kind of hoping these tariffs will buy them some time?
Well, the tariffs might give them a little breathing room, maybe a chance to regroup. But Intel's not just sitting around waiting. They've got their own plans. They're working on developing some even more advanced process nodes themselves. They're calling their next two big leaps Jaguar Shores.
Jaguar Shores. I like the sound of that.
It's got a nice ring to it.
So first up, they've got their 18A node, and then after that comes 14A. Are these going to be Intel's secret weapons?
Well, they're certainly hoping so. They're putting a lot of faith in these new nodes, supposed to be game changers, packing in more transistors than ever before. And they're also introducing a whole new type of transistor structure called ribbon FET.
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. Spill it. What's the catch?
There's always a catch, isn't there? The catch here is time. These new nodes, they're not quite ready for prime time yet.
So they're not in mass production.
Not yet. The most optimistic estimates, they have 18A hitting the market late 2024 at the earliest.
Oh, wow.
And 14A, well, that's not expected until early 2026.
So can they really hit those deadlines?
That's the million-dollar question.
And even if they do, can they make enough of these chips consistently with high quality?
That's the other million-dollar question.
Sounds like we're talking about a real nail-biter here.
Oh, absolutely. This is going to be a close one.
And it's not just about being first either.
Right. It's about delivering a product that works flawlessly, and at scale.
At a price that makes sense.
Right. Exactly. It's a complex equation with a lot of moving parts.
And remember, TSMC, they're not just sitting around either.
Oh, no, they're not resting on their laurels.
They're also developing their own next-gen nodes.
Always pushing the envelope.
So even if Intel manages to hit those deadlines, the question is, are those Jaguar Shores nodes going to be good enough?
To actually close that gap?
Maybe even take the lead.
That's what we're all waiting to see.
All right. I am officially hooked. This is getting good. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I think we need to take a step back and really define what being ahead means in this world, in the world of semiconductors.
Okay, yeah, that's important.
What are the key factors here, the things we need to be watching for?
All right, well, first off, we've got to talk about transistor density.
Okay.
Like I mentioned earlier, it's all about squeezing in as many transistors as you can onto that tiny little chip.
Right.
But it's not just about quantity, right? It's about quality, too.
Oh, okay. So what does that mean?
You need those transistors to perform well. They got to switch on and off quickly, efficiently.
Oh, I see.
That's where things like power consumption come in.
Yeah.
And performance, of course.
So it's not just about cramming them all in there.
Nope.
It's about making sure they all work together.
Like a well-oiled machine.
Exactly. What else should we be paying attention to?
Well, there's also this thing called yield. Yield. It's crucial in chip manufacturing. Think of it like baking cookies.
Baking cookies. Okay.
You might make a whole batch, but some come out burnt, some are undercooked.
Right, yeah.
Yield is all about what percentage of the chips actually come out of the whole manufacturing process working perfectly.
Okay.
Fully functional. And the higher that yield is, the more cost-effective the whole operation is.
So it's like you could have the most amazing cookie recipe in the world.
Right.
But if you burn half the batch,
exactly,
you're not going to be very successful.
Not going to sell many cookies.
Right.
High yield is essential if you want to be profitable.
Especially with these, cutting-edge nodes. Right?
Oh, absolutely. They're so complex, so sensitive. Any little thing can go wrong.
Okay, starting to see how high the stakes are in this whole chip race.
Oh, yeah. It's a high-stakes game for sure.
But before we dive into, what the future might hold, I want to understand how Intel's actually planning to pull off this potential leapfrog.
Okay, yeah, let's get into the nitty-gritty.
What are their secret weapons? What are they betting on?
Well, like I said, they're really betting big on those Jaguar Shores nodes, the 18A and 14A.
Right. Those are the ones.
But it's the details, It's the details where the real innovation is.
Okay, yeah, give me those details.
So they're introducing something called ribbon FET transistors.
Ribbon FET. Okay, that's new.
Think about traditional transistors. They're like, fins sticking up from the surface of the chip. But these ribbon FET transistors, they're more like, ribbons laid flat.
Okay, I'm trying to picture this.
It's a whole different structure. And this structure, this ribbon shape, it gives them so much more control over how the electrons flow.
So finer control.
Way finer, which means, faster switching speeds, less power leakage, all that good stuff.
So it's like swapping out clunky old fences for these sleek, high-tech gates?
Ooh, I like that analogy. That's a great way to put it.
A tri-fit.
And to make those gates even more efficient, they're doing something pretty radical, actually.
Okay, what's that?
It's called backside power delivery.
Backside power delivery. I don't think I've heard of that.
So imagine a city
Okay.
Where all the power lines and data cables, they all run above ground.
Yeah.
Creating this tangled mess.
I've seen that.
Backside power delivery. It's like taking all those power lines and moving them underground. Frees up all this space, makes everything run smoother, more efficiently.
So they're basically decluttering the chip.
Exactly. Less clutter, more power. And on top of all that, they're investing heavily in something called high-NA EUV lithography.
High-NA EUV lithography. Wow, okay. You've officially lost me.
All right, so EUV stands for extreme ultraviolet.
Extreme ultraviolet.
And it's this super precise way of etching those tiny little transistor patterns.
Onto the silicon wafers.
You got it. High-NA just takes that precision to a whole other level.
So even smaller features.
Even smaller, even more densely packed. It's cutting-edge stuff.
All right, I gotta admit, all this talk of nanometers in extreme ultraviolet light.
Yeah.
It's starting to sound a little bit like science fiction to me.
It's getting pretty wild out there on the cutting edge.
But it's clear they're pulling out all the stops to catch up.
Right. Oh, absolutely. They're going all in.
But it's got to be a risky strategy. I mean, developing this stuff, implementing it.
It's incredibly complex and expensive.
Right.
Remember a cookie analogy?
The cookies, yeah.
Well, imagine trying to bake billions of those cookies.
Billions?
Each one perfectly identical, with absolutely no room for error.
Oh, wow. That's a lot of pressure.
That's basically what they're trying to do here. Even the slightest little imperfection, that can make a chip completely useless.
Ah, so that impacts their yield.
Big time. And ultimately, their bottom line.
Okay, so it's not just about having a great idea. It's about being able to execute it flawlessly on a massive scale.
Welcome to the world of semiconductor manufacturing.
Man, I can see why this is such a nail-biter.
Yeah.
But let's say, hypothetically, everything goes according to plan.
Okay.
Intel, they hit all their deadlines.
Right.
Those Jaguar Shores nodes, they're a smashing success. And they managed to get those sky-high yields.
Okay, I'm following. What happens next?
What happens next?
Well, in that scenario, Intel could very well be back on top.
Really? Back in the league?
Leading the pack again. They might even surpass TSMC when it comes to, the actual process technology.
That would be huge.
That would be a major coup. They'd be the go-to for the most advanced chips.
And what would that mean, for the rest of the tech industry?
Oh, massive ripple effects. Think about it. All those devices that rely on those cutting-edge chips. Smartphones, laptops, gaming consoles, data centers.
Even cars these days.
Even cars. Intel would be powering the next generation of all that technology.
Wow. So, companies like Apple, who are, pretty much all in on TSMC right now.
Right.
They might start switching to Intel.
It's possible. They want the best chips, right?
So we could see Intel chips in the iPhone 15.
Hey, you never know. And it goes beyond just consumer electronics, too.
Oh, yeah.
Think about fields like artificial intelligence, machine learning, drug discovery. These advancements in semiconductors, they're crucial for all that stuff. A stronger Intel could mean faster progress in all those areas.
So basically, a successful Intel means a faster, more powerful, more innovative tech landscape for everyone.
That's the dream, right?
Yeah, the dream. But gotta play devil's advocate here.
Always good to look at both sides.
What if things don't go according to plan? What are some other scenarios we should be thinking about?
Well, first of all, remember, this is all hypothetical. The reality is Intel's got some serious hurdles to overcome.
Okay, yeah, like what?
Delays, for one. They could easily run into delays getting those new nodes up and running.
Right.
Right. This is incredibly complex stuff. We're talking about, building these incredibly tiny structures on a massive scale.
Any little hiccup could throw everything off.
Exactly. Time is definitely not on Intel's side here.
So time's a big one. What else could trip them up?
Well, even if they do hit their deadlines, there's no guarantee that those Jaguar Shores nodes are going to live up to the hype.
Oh, right.
Maybe the performance isn't quite what they're expecting. Or maybe TSMC counters with their own even more advanced nodes. We're talking about a constantly evolving field here.
So it's like a moving target.
Exactly. Anything could happen.
And then there's the whole political and economic landscape.
Oh, yeah. Can't forget about that.
You can't just ignore that.
This isn't just about Intel versus TSMC. Governments all over the world are starting to pay a lot more attention to semiconductors.
Right, because it's such a crucial industry.
There's this push for, more domestic chip production, concerns about supply chain vulnerabilities. There's even the potential for trade wars.
Wow. So the future of Intel, and really the entire tech landscape, it's tied up in this whole web of
Of what?
Technological innovation, economic competition, and geopolitics.
It's a tangled web for sure.
Yeah, a lot to wrap our heads around.
But that's what makes it so fascinating, right?
Absolutely. And it just shows why it's so important to stay informed, to understand these forces that are shaping the world around us.
Couldn't agree more. Knowledge is power.
All right, I'm ready to dive back into the nitty-gritty. Let's talk about what we should actually be watching for over the next couple of years. What are those key indicators, the things that'll tell us who's really winning this chip race?
Well, for starters, we got to keep our eyes on those production timelines.
Right, for Intel's 18A and 14A?
Exactly. See if they hit those deadlines or if they start running into, any snags, any delays.
Right, because if they start slipping.
Could be a sign of trouble.
Yeah. But even if they do stay on track, it sounds like we need to be looking beyond just like the dates on the calendar.
Oh, absolutely. Dates only tell part of the story.
So what else should we be paying attention to?
Well, we got to see how those chips actually perform, right?
Okay.
Once they're out there in the wild.
Yeah. Yeah, like how do they stack up against what TSMC's offering?
Exactly. In terms of, speed,
Yeah.
power efficiency. And those yields, those all-important yields.
Right. Because if those yields aren't high enough,
it's going to be a problem.
Yeah. So I guess we're waiting for like those first benchmark tests.
Yep.
Reviews from, the companies who are actually using these chips.
Exactly. That'll give us some real insights.
It's like waiting for those first reviews of a hot new phone or something.
I know, right? Everyone wants to know, does it live up to the hype?
Exactly. And speaking of hype, I guess we should also be paying attention to who's actually using these chips.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like, are we seeing those big players, like Apple, NVIDIA, AMD?
It's big dogs.
Are they making the switch? Are they choosing Intel?
Those decisions, they speak volumes.
Yeah, it's not just about what Intel says.
Oh.
It's about who's actually putting their money where their mouth is.
Actions speak louder than words.
Always. And beyond all these, like, specific indicators, we got to remember that the whole landscape, it's constantly changing, right?
Oh, yeah. It's a dynamic industry, always in flux.
So we got to keep track of, like, government policies, anything related to chip manufacturing.
For sure.
Any breakthroughs in related technologies.
Keep your ear to the ground.
And even, like, changes in consumer demand.
All of that can have an impact.
Yeah. It's like a multi-dimensional chess game or something.
I like that. Lots of pieces moving at once.
And you got to be thinking several steps ahead.
Absolutely. But for the average person, someone who's, using technology every day,
right,
these developments, they have a real impact. I mean, the stuff that Intel and TSMC are working on, that's going to determine how fast your phone is, what it can do, even how much it costs.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. This isn't just some, like, abstract competition,
Nope.
happening in a lab somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
It affects all of us.
We're all part of this ecosystem.
So before we wrap things up, I wanted to go back to something you mentioned earlier about, like, the potential benefits of all this competition. You were saying that, even if Intel doesn't completely dominate,
right,
having a stronger Intel is actually good for everyone, for consumers.
I think so, yeah.
So how does that work?
Well, think about it this way. When you've got, two companies, both vying for that top spot, it forces them to constantly innovate, to push the boundaries.
Right, like to be better.
Exactly. It's like an arms race, but instead of weapons, they're competing with, better chips, faster chips, cheaper chips.
So it's a win-win for consumers.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
Even if there's not, like, a clear winner in this whole Intel versus TSMC thing, we all benefit. We get better products at lower prices.
Yeah.
All thanks to that competition.
I love a good, healthy competition. And beyond the price, I guess that competition also leads to, like...
To what?
To faster advancements, right? Like across the board.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Companies are constantly under pressure to, to improve, to one-up each other. And we all reap the rewards.
Okay, that's a really encouraging thought. Makes me excited to see how this all plays out.